Tonight we have Knox Msebenzi. He is currently the Managing Director of the Nuclear Industry Association of South Africa, which is NIASA. But he has a very, very distinguished history and career, and I'm going to just run through the main points of that, but I'm being told not to. Just very modest. He trained at the University of Cambridge and has an MBA from Wits and in engineering, in electrical power engineer. He's been project engineer at Hwangi coal-fired power station in Zimbabwe. He's lectured in electrical power systems and machines at the University of Botswana and the University of Natal. He's been the plant engineer at Hewlett's Aluminium, general manager at South African Breweries, Port Elizabeth, general manager of several important companies related to energy and nuclear, country manager for Plessy in Zambia, senior manager of laboratories at NEXO, which is the Nuclear Energy Corporation South Africa, and the chief technical officer at the National Nuclear Regulator. So he's extremely well qualified to be leading the country's Nuclear Industry Association South Africa, which is NIASA, and we're looking forward to hearing what he has to say to debunk the myths of nuclear. But in addition, we have several key players in the nuclear industry with us this evening, including Dave Nichols, who is head of nuclear at Eskom, and he's trying to be incognito in the back. We have Des Muller, who is also with NIASA and is a consultant in the nuclear industry. And we have Andrew Kenny, who is also in the audience, I think, yes, who has very strong views on the nuclear industry and energy. So I'm sure we'll have a very lively debate. And please ask questions. If you would keep them to the end, then we can ask questions and have a conversation. So may I welcome you with greatest pleasure, Knox.
Thank you. Thank you very much. When one gets introduced and they say he's currently the managing director, it's a bit like introducing, I'm currently married to this guy, or this is currently, suggests that you may be moving on. No, it's fine, it's fine. I'm just, but it's normal. People do speak like that. But when some.
Like ministers.
Yeah, no, yes, that's appropriate. That's very relevant. But you don't say, this is currently my wife. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity. I hope you will not be disappointed. I will just be speaking from my heart, really. I don't have these structured presentations that span pages and pages. I'm just not like that. The bullets that I'm going to be talking about through, the main issue, Jane has already touched on it, corruption, is the buzzword whenever you mention nuclear. It's almost as if it's equivalent. Cost, I'll touch on that. I'm not an economist. We've got prominent economists in the House, but I'll talk about public perceptions about costs. I'm not going to go deep into safety issues. What does the public perceive things to be? Then I will talk about a few things I called just between friends. Some of issues perhaps looking inward. This is the time that I stand in front of a mirror and see the image, and I try and look at that as an industry. Corruption. Every time you hear or see headlines, it is always associated, nuclear is always associated with corruption. And yet corruption is actually a governance issue, not a nuclear issue. It's not a technology issue. But we somehow put these things together. I often tell I was at a talk about 2 months ago with EarthLife Africa. And I said to them, if you organize a march against corruption, I'll join you. if you organize a march against nuclear weapons, I'll join you. But if you organize a march against nuclear power generation, sorry, I will not join you because I think you're wrong. So we need to make that distinction. We are not for corruption when we're talking about nuclear, but for some reason, the public is made to believe that if you are for nuclear, if you're talking about nuclear, if you ever mention nuclear, you must be in with the Russians, you must be in with the corruption and so on, with the Guptas and so on. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily the case. I can't stand here and defend and say I know everything about intelligence. I'm not in that space. I'm in the technology space. I can tell you that there is nothing corrupt about nuclear. The corruption is with people. If we are a nation that can shy away from addressing challenges of corruption, we are saying let's not do nuclear because we fear that Jacob Zuma or whoever may be corrupt. What kind of a nation are we? We don't do things that are good for us because we fear that there might be corruption or we believe there is corruption. That's another story. So we need to be very, very careful as a nation in terms of saying that. But unfortunately, that is the public perception about nuclear. The regulated nature of the industry makes it much more difficult. It's hardly possible that you can sign any nuclear. I almost used the word deal, but I'm very careful not to use that word deal because it is abused. The word deal is grossly abused in this country. I don't know in other countries, but it's grossly abused. You get to a point, I'll talk about it, get to a point where you're talking about the intergovernmental agreements. The media will say the deals. What deal are you talking about? You hardly ever have any arrangement throughout the world which is not scrutinized with a large microscope. You cannot hide if you are embarking on any nuclear program because of the regulated nature of the industry. But unfortunately, we believe, or the public believes that there is some intention to hide because of the trillion, because of the arms deal, because of whatever. And there's a lot of noise in the system. So my take is that it is very, very difficult to hide any form of corruption in the nuclear industry because of its regulated nature. If I was a government official and I wanted to steal some money, I would just build some roads. Nobody cares about that. I just do some civil works and whatever. Nobody really, there is no international body that looks at what technology did South Africa adopt when they built a highway between point A and point B. But nuclear, everybody is talking about it, everybody is referencing. So it becomes very, very difficult to actually be corrupt under those circumstances. That is really what I believe in. We still have international vendors interested in bidding for the program. I would like to imagine that if the assertion that Rosatom has already signed a deal with South Africa, the intelligence in France, the intelligence in South Korea, the intelligence in America would have picked it up. Why are those vendors still interested when they know already that a deal has been signed? Are they stupid? Is it us, our intelligence here in South Africa, that is much smarter than them? Why? I cannot for the life of me understand why other vendors, we have members of NIASA who are vendors, who are interested in, we've been here since 2007, 2008, thereabouts. If the deal has been signed, then again, I'm not here to defend anything about corruption because that's not my area of expertise, but I'm just saying, as a practitioner in the nuclear industry, I find it very difficult to understand why we believe those things. I spoke about the use of the nuclear deal, which is commonly used, even referring to international governmental agreements. Words have got a way of portraying certain pictures. We choose words, the media in particular, we choose words that would give, without saying anything, if you simply say a nuclear deal, there is already a connotation of some underhandedness. So that term deal is really abused. And as I say, it has been used when it refers to intergovernmental agreements. Those are not deals. Those are standard things that are done. You would need those standard agreements when you are building renewables, when you are building coal plants. You need that understanding between countries if you're going to be, there's going to be any technology transfer. But it's referred to as a deal. The government has now been taken to court and they've been told to abandon their nuclear deals with Russians. The connection with corruption and Russia resonates very well with certain communities. I would not be surprised if the bashing of Russia in some people's minds is in the subconscious of the Cold War mentality of anything Russian is, if we were brought up maybe to be told that Russia, communist, all these kind of things, the minute you hear something that might not be what you like, it does not require a lot of energy to get you worked up and become psychologically opposed to any such deal. I have a strong suspicion that some of this resonates very well with certain communities that are just anti-Russia because of the Cold War sentiments. Some people, not everybody, but some people are like that. The connection also with the Guptas, in my mind, to my mind, is tenuous. I've heard people saying the Guptas have bought a uranium mine. The connection between a uranium mine and a nuclear power plant is a bit like the connection between a gold mine and a jewelry. You mine the gold and sell it in the international market. And then you buy the gold from the international market in order to process it for jewelry. You do not mine gold and send it straight to a gold jewelry. So that connection, I find it troublesome. I don't care what the issues are with the Guptas, whatever, the corruption, whatever. But to say because the Guptas have bought a uranium mine, therefore they are wanting to have the nuclear power plants constructed. I mean, it basically says all the experts in ESCOM who have actually worked hard to say we need nuclear and so on are only doing this because of the Guptas. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, those are some of the perceptions that we have. Costs. I'm going to talk about costs from a point of view of just the perceptions. The figure of R1 trillion is being thrown around. It is being taken as a fact that it is going to cost R1 trillion. And this deal is worth R1 trillion. We can debate about the costs of the program, the cost of the nuclear power plants. At this point in time, because there have not been any submissions made by the vendors, except for the vendor parades, we have got no authoritative figures in terms of costs. But what we have are references to recent projects. That's what we base our estimations on. But be that as it may, what is often not said is it is that amount of money over a period of 20 to 30 years. And then you hear people saying that is about our national budget, so we are going to bankrupt this country. But you don't say that amount of money is over a period of 20 to 30 years. It's the total project, 9.6 gigawatts, so to speak. We debate about the amounts that are being thrown around, but what is more important is that amount is not a once-off payment to anybody. You also get the impression that Treasury is going to sign a check of R1 trillion to procure these nuclear power plants. I would really love for Treasury to do that, because it means you and I can have free electricity, because it's already been paid for. The way I understand it, projects are paid for by the rate payers. You go to the international market, borrow some money, build the nuclear power plant or coal power plant or renewable for that matter. You repay back that loan through the revenue that you accrue from the rate payers. Now, if our treasury is so good to us that it wants to pay for this nuclear power plant upfront, I'll be the happiest person, because that it means we'll have free electricity. It's already been paid for. But what I understand is Treasury is there to guarantee the loans, just like they would guarantee with any major project in this country. You cannot undertake any major project without Treasury underwriting or guaranteeing those loans. It happens with the renewables as well. So this is not peculiar to nuclear. That is my understanding. Cost comparisons are usually done for goods and services that are comparable or equivalent. To compare solar, for example, renewable solar or wind, a megawatt installation and a megawatt of nuclear is just, it's literally comparing apples and oranges. Because although you have so many megawatts installation, the amount of energy that you can get out is totally different. It's chalk and cheese in a sense. Yes, in a simple way, a solar power plant only gives you power during the day. That's a fact. So it means you would need to have some storage in order to cycle through the.
And that exists.
I was coming to that. You're obviously ahead of me. I was coming to that. It cannot give you, it cannot generate, a solar power plant cannot generate electricity 24 hours a day.
But it can store it 24 hours.
That
as
is,
wind can. As most other things can.
okay.
May I ask you to keep the questions to the end? And then we can have
I'm not doing questions, I'm doing statements.
statements.
No, I think the enthusiasm just overwhelmed it. It's fine. I'm not I don't mind. I know very well. So it's not. Yeah, we had a good chat before coming in, and we met at Nexa.
Okay.
So no, it's between friends. It's between friends. So. So I would say this is another problem that we have in this country, in the world in general. The experts who have been planning or providing us with power, who spent years studying and years, operating power plants, they will tell you this. And then you have some politicians, activists, and whatever, who have become overnight experts at telling people what the best form of energy is supposed to be. That is democracy. That's good. Cost estimates are based on some case studies. Like I was saying earlier on, we have not had any RFIs. It was stopped at the last moment. Dave Nichols is here in the house. He would know that much better than I do. And therefore, to say this is going to cost us that much, we do not know. All we can do is base it on some case studies or something that has happened in the recent past. And in any case, cost is not the only criteria for a decision. When you are embarking on a major procurement project, usually you have boxes. And typically in this country, we even have boxes about BEE and what. So cost cannot be the only criteria that is used. What we need to think about is the return on investment we make our calculations and find it is cheaper to import solar panels that are made in China and put them in and generate and install a megawatt than to build a nuclear power plant in South Africa. If we find that it is going to be more expensive that way, we may want to make a decision to say, more expensive as it might be, but what are the benefits of this versus that? You can't just base on this is cheaper and therefore go for it. If that was the case, you would only see one type of car on the road in South Africa, maybe Tata or Honda, but that's not the case. Cost is not, it's an important factor, particularly when you consider the raise that you are going to be passing on to the consumers. That's a very important factor. But nuclear engineers are not idiots who just do these things for the sake of it. They are working within a certain constraint. But as I said, I'm not an economist. There is a very good article that Dr. Anthony Silius published recently. It is in News 24, Fin 24. For those of you that would be interested, he compared two recent power plants, one solar and the other one nuclear. And it is deceptive because on the face of it, you might say solar would be 77 cents per kilowatt installation for argument's sake. But once you start factoring the storage that you would need for you to have 24-hour supply, the storage that you would need if there is a rainy day and cloudy day and so on, the costs keep going up. Once you factor the intricate network of distribution and transmission, which is a lot more complex than a concentrated supply or generation of power. When you're talking about distributed generation, yes, you can argue that you send the power to where it is needed, generated where it's needed. Good point. But if you take a city like Johannesburg, and let's say for argument's sake, we have decided to do away with coal and nuclear, and we only work on renewables. In our country, the only renewables that are viable will be solar, wind, because hydro is not quite what it's supposed to be. Then you are hit with a Hurricane Dineo for 3-4 days. Let us assume that Mpumalanga, Gauteng, and a bit of Limpopo, they're all overcast. You would need to transport power from the Northern Cape in gigawatts to bring it to the industrial nerve of this country, to the airport, to the hospitals, and so on. So that requires quite a substantial amount of reconfiguration of the grid. We're not saying 20 years from now, we might not have a reconfigured grid that could take care of these things, but to simply say, to compare the cost of generation of solar with the cost of generation of nuclear without looking at the intricacies is really misleading. Safety is an issue that is often branded about. There are different types of anti-nuclear people. There's those that are hell-bent on saying that nuclear is not safe, and there are those that are saying safety is not an issue, and my only issue is cost. Other people would say, no, my only issue is corruption and whatever. But so you've got different types of people that end up being anti-nuclear. And the three incidents that often get to be quoted, and they're quoted all the time, the 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima, in an industry which has got in excess of 400 nuclear power plants or reactors, to be just continuously quoting these three. Yes, if you do have a terrible incident, it can have catastrophic means. But when you consider, for example, that we routinely bury 30,000 people that are killed on the roads in South Africa, and we hardly ever talk about banning vehicles on the road. What we talk about is how do we manage, how do we reduce the number of deaths. The Department of Transport announces over the festive period that the death toll is whatever. And there's no issue about let's stop driving on the roads. Why don't we have the same approach in terms of saying we are increasing on our safety in nuclear, but because the benefits outweigh any dangers, in my opinion and other people's opinion. There are, for want of a better word, nucleophobes that they've got a terrible picture of nuclear, and quite frankly, I don't blame anybody that has got this fear of nuclear. It's a bit like blaming somebody that's got a fear of heights. There's nothing you can do about it. You need to deal with it in terms of manage it. But if somebody has got that fear of nuclear, no amount of facts is likely to convince them otherwise. Because there will be some of those people who would say, I'm so scared of nuclear, don't even come anywhere close to me with an X-ray because it smacks of nuclear. I don't even want. That's fine. It's freedom of choice. That's fine. The argument, which is seductive, which says we are burdening our future generations for thousands of years with nuclear waste, as if it is a problem, as if the world has not found a solution for nuclear waste. When in fact I was sparring with somebody on Twitter who's anti-nuclear. We've actually become friends, but we see things differently. But we've become friends on Twitter. And I was saying to him, give me a casket that has got nuclear waste. I will sit on it and sip a cup of tea. And then he said, you use the water from the nuclear reactor for your tea. I almost responded by saying that water is so expensive. It's more expensive than an 18-year-old single malt. But I didn't go that far. It would be a misapplication of that pure refined water to use it for a cup of tea. That's the only reason why I would not use it for that. Anyway, but that's some game that we're playing on Twitter. So this issue, the experts will tell you, is no argument. We have a nuclear regulator which will grant a nuclear license only, and only if they are satisfied that the nuclear waste disposal has been taken care of right at the design stage when you submit a safety case to the regulator. So nobody's going to even start digging foundations on a nuclear power plant until the regulator is satisfied that you have taken care of the commissioning, you have taken care of your nuclear waste, and so on. We get the impression that ESCOM is now sitting with nuclear waste and they don't know what to do with it. It is not true. ESCOM would not be able to sit like that with a regulator, with International Atomic Energy Agency. It's just not true. But I think the people like Dave Nichols will be able to tell you a lot more about that, who are actually operating this. Sorry, what did I do? Okay. There's also, I kind of get a sense that sometimes there's a patronizing attitude towards us as a country. You hear people saying, can you manage a nuclear, do you have the skills to run a nuclear power plant? And then when you tell them that we've been running Quebec for the last 30 years, they say, oh, okay. And we've been running Nexa for the past over 50 years. There's a certain attitude towards, for certain people, not from you, from certain people. You're not.
To ask for right of reply.
Certain people are like that. Present company excluded. So I certainly get that sense from certain people to say you're in Africa. I heard people saying if Japan could have such an accident, What about you in South Africa? But we have been operating this nuclear power plant, or the Kube, for the past over 30 years. I hate this business of, because you're an African country, you don't belong to this big league. That's very patronizing. There is an element of that from certain people, not from everybody, but from certain people. Anyway, just between friends, amongst ourselves as nationals, whether we are pro-nuclear or anti-nuclear, some points. I think the industry needs to up its game in educating the public, those that need to be educated. There are those that are hardcore that will never actually, they're impervious to any information or knowledge about nuclear. But certainly, there are certain members of the public that would need some information. When you tell them that nobody actually died of radiation at Fukushima, they say, "Whoa, we thought those 20,000 people died because of a nuclear." It says no. There are people who are like that. We can learn a few lessons from the anti-nuclear lobby, because they've been very successful in convincing the rank and file that nuclear is bad news. But I'm not suggesting that we go around preaching that renewables or whatever bad news, because we actually believe that we need an energy mix. The other problem that we have as nuclear practitioners is that we've got this nerdish approach to situations. When people are asking questions or raising concerns, we tend to bombard them with facts. When all they are looking for maybe it's an emotional response. It's a bit, as I was coming here, I was listening to some of the pronouncements from the new Minister of, no, not finance, police. If I phoned, or he's a Twitter, he loves being on Twitter. If I sent him a Twitter message to say, I have been robbed or my family is in a serious situation of crime, and he responds to me by giving me crime statistics that it has actually come down, I would feel like going to kill him. At that point, I am not looking for facts. I'm looking for perhaps empathy. It's an emotion. I'm reaching out to the minister in an emotional state. I don't want facts about crime has come down. Actually, it's much better now than, no, that's not what I'm looking. So I'm saying sometimes you don't respond to situations with just facts and information. We need to find ways of reaching and understanding where people are coming from. I said earlier on, there were people who are naturally scared of nuclear. It was introduced the wrong way through war. And so it is not surprising that you have people who have got a natural phobia of nuclear. We need to be sensitive to those people and not dismiss them as if they're out of their minds. The message of energy mix is not gaining traction because of too much noise. I don't know where we're getting it wrong, because we are not saying nuclear is the only answer. We are saying we need an energy mix. Each one of the technologies has got its own place. Even the things that I would have said in terms of you can't compare nuclear and solar. Solar has got its own place. There are places. I have a solar PV on my roof for my geyser. It's got good storage. It's cost effective. I'm very proud of that. I'm not anti-renewables at all, but I'm against the lies that are spread that you can run an economy, especially an economy that aspires to be manufacturing, that aspires to run smelters, that has got airports that are running 24 hours a day and that sort of thing, only on renewables. That is what I'm against. I'm not against any forms of energy whatsoever. Not enough is being said about potential of nuclear for conjunctive use in power generation and desalination. The Middle East countries that have got lots of oil have capitalized on their source of energy as oil to use it to desalinate as a source of heat to desalinate their water, and they are doing very well. We can use our uranium as a source of heat to literally boil the seawater, capture the steam, condense it, and drink it. and use it for, in our cities, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth and so on. We should actually be looking at a situation where we have got rivers that are flowing upstream from the coasts to Gauteng. If we do our job right. In the Middle East, they do it very successfully. And you don't go to Saudi Arabia and you open the taps and there's no water. There's water, but they don't have any rainfall of note. So we're sitting on a gold mine, so to speak, with all our uranium. Use it as a source of heat to do that. So this issue about the conjunctive use of electricity generation and desalination has not been explored enough. And I think the public should be made aware of the potential that we're losing out by not doing this. But I think, as I said, we're looking at ourselves to say we're not doing such a great job in that way. The industry needs to transform itself and attract young people and more women. Transformation is the order of the day in this country. I think it's important that we do that, we address that as an industry. And I think with those few words, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Knox, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting and thought-provoking. No, don't go away.
Oh.
Madam Chair, I do want right of reply.
Yes, yes. Everyone is welcome to put forward comments and questions. And Knox, are you happy if we?
Yeah, sure. Let me get
start with this lady?
a piece of paper to note. Yeah,
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Judith Taylor. I'm one of the interim board members of Earth Life
oh,
Africa.
I've got it.
I also have worked strongly with Bruno de Cherian or Chirac. He is a nuclear physicist, and he is anti-nuclear because of the following things. You mentioned 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. Are you aware of MEAC? Are you aware of Sellafield? Are you aware of Winskill? Are you aware of Saint-Honoré? Those are just other incidents of nuclear failure. However, the biggest nuclear failure is what the nuclear industry ignores, and that is the mining and processing of uranium. Throughout the world, processing of uranium to nuclear power rods has produced a situation where the Navajo in the US have had their lifespans destroyed from 90 odd years to under 60.
Thank you very much.
People are suffering from this all the time.
We would be delighted to give you a platform to speak one evening and give the opposite point of view, but tonight I think we're going to let Knox continue with his questions. But thank you very much for your contribution.
Yep.
And I will be in touch to arrange something.
Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I think the lady should be given an opportunity to say at least.
Look, give her a time span then and then.
No, but let her give her another 2 or 3 minutes. You don't need to shut off. Give her another 3 or 5 minutes. I think that's enough.
And I can take it within.
Well, I think we came here tonight to hear Knox, and that was what was actually
Is
advertised.
that the general opinion that we
I
want?
think we have another time to hear other things.
She wants to make a speech and so do I. So
I
I'd
think
like
we
to
have
let
to
her make
close.
a little speech first and I'll make
Thank
mine.
you, Andrew. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Andrew, but I think, I'm sorry, but at this point, I've given you a few minutes, and I think we need to continue with our evening with Knox.
Sorry, we have,
Thank you.
if I may say, as the executive director, we have one speaker tonight. And whether it's pro or anti, we're not having other speakers. We can have other events with other speakers, but tonight we have one speaker, and you can direct comments or questions at that speaker. So I'm sorry to say, we can organize for you to give a talk,
I'm
but
very
this is
willing to
not,
do that.
this is not your speaking engagement. So I'm sorry you have to go down.
Well,
But thank you very much. We did appreciate it.
If anybody wants to ask me anything else afterwards, please do.
Please do, yes. And now, Anthony, you were next. Put your hand up, please.
No, look, I'm on the whole a nuclear fan, so I'm here. It's not very politically correct to agree with it. But what I want to know is, there's so much talk about this is the nuclear project is something like a 10,000 megawatt or 9,600 or thereabouts. I think that's right. Is that about right?
9.8.
9.8. 6.6. What I want to know is it possible to do this in a modular way? Because apparently that 9.6 is comprised of 9 or 10 different units. Now, is it possible to procure this in a modular way, where you procure one or two and then add as and when necessary, depending on the growth of the country and things like that? Because I think if that is possible, then it should really be something that the nuclear industry starts to talk about, because that will pull the teeth of so many arguments. One, cost. Two, what is our growth in the economy going to be like, and what will our demand be like, especially when we've got quite a lot of installed coal coming on. And if we could bring flexibility into the equation, I think it would do the argument a lot of good. I'd like to
I think Dave is well placed to answer that
Can I
question.
answer that? Because sort of my project, sort of small detail. Okay, you obviously didn't. Who read the request for information we put out to the public in December? Public information was on our website. Well, anybody.
ESCOM.
You asked a question. I'm saying ESCOM put it out and National Treasury put it out. Just to mention it because in that document it explicitly says what we're looking to do is to contract for 2 machines and to commit in principle to a further tranche beyond that. Right? And the reason that difference, I can explain in some detail, the contracting side, we end up saying that we want to make sure that we contract for the first 2, we've got some deal on the follow-on machines, otherwise when you come back for machine number 3, they've got you over a barrel.
But you don't have to go.
You don't have to go there. The second point I make is that ESCOM is currently sitting with 34,000 megawatts of rather elderly coal station, ranging from Kamati, which is in the mid-60s, so it's 50 years old, to the newest station we have, which is Majuba, which is only 20 years old. Right? Just to put it in context.
And 2 unfinished power stations.
So we're finishing the power stations off quite nicely, thank you. And over the next few years, we've got to replace that 34,000 megawatts of coal fleet with something else. And at the moment, in terms of keeping the lights on as we speak at the moment, because I'm not sure solar's doing as much good at the moment, we see it as being, you've got 4 choices available to you, which is you can build more coal, you can build hydro, you can build natural gas, you can build nuclear. That's basically what's on the table.
And what about the grid, which is failing?
Why is the grid failing?
Because you haven't been maintaining it.
We're putting 18 billion rands into the grid in the next few years to install more renewables. So
we're already
so we put a lot of maintenance into it, and the grid is pretty good. The lights have stayed on all the time. The answer to the question, therefore, is if we don't want to build coal because of carbon constraints, we don't want to build gas because we haven't got any.
Well, keep on with coal and we'll just wipe out most of the coal and we'll do
Fine, so we're on the same page there, Mark, then you can. Hydro is wonderful if you happen to have Grand Inga in your country, so if we move Grand Inga into the Free State, I'll take that, but moving Grand Inga to the Free State is a bit of a challenge. So hydro would only be imported, which is foreign exchange going out and no jobs being created. Gas, we haven't got any. It's still carbon emissions, but we haven't got any gas. If we find some gas, it'd be great, but Moss Gas can't find any more gas. We may find shell gas, but it ain't there yet. Which sort of leaves us with one solution to replace 34,000 megawatts of coal fleet. Right? Just to put it in context. And other solutions, please tell me, because we'd love to use them.
local
Concentrated solar power storage.
5 rand a megawatt out, 5 rand a unit. The
stop.
CSP's.
You're using 5-year-old.
I'm using the current bid document we have today.
Well, you better update it.
Well, it's a sorry.
You better update it.
Okay,
Solar concentrated is under 1 rand a
Oh no,
kilowatt.
please, you are living in a country.
I am not.
Please, I was going to ask a question about the build, but the build is that we're doing it in unit size.
What, 7 to 20 years? Is that going to be
Just give
useful?
your
No.
name.
Hi Knox, my name is Neville Gurry. I'm an engineer, but I'm not a nuclear expert. I have two questions to ask you. What happened to pebble beds? Number one. And number two, we have a, what's the place here? Near Rustenburg on the way from? Pilendaba. What's happened to the waste there?
It's still sitting there.
So why doesn't someone do something about it?
Well, we've got a heck of a lot of.
Nothing to do with
now
Eskom.
ask
I know it's nothing to do with
Speaker to
Eskom, but I'm just
respond,
asking, does the
Speaker,
nuclear
it's directed at
organisation
Knox.
look
Now
at
ask
that
him
and
to
make that a
respond.
big issue? Just a question.
No.
And the pebble,
Excuse
please,
me.
I'm talking to Knox.
Please,
And the
we
pebble
have a
bed, what
speaker.
happened to that?
Okay, actually, Dave is in the room. He has said in the public sphere that they're in the process of revisiting the paper bed modular rate. But he probably, if he wants to add something, he can add. Let me go back to the issue about the Belinda the research reactor.
Yes.
What?
I was not against it, by the way.
Yeah, no. The high level waste is being stored
Yes.
in the pools on the nuclear power plant as per approval by the then Council for Safety, whatever, before it became the NNR. The low level waste is being transported after being conditioned in casks. That, as I was saying, I'll be quite happy to drink a cup of coffee sitting on top of one. It's being transported to the Northern Cape to a place called Falpots. International observers know about this, IAEA, everything is fine. So that's what's happening. Yeah. The same applies to Kube, by the way.
Gone to China.
So, Dev, do you want to say something about?
I'm being shot now. So two answers. First answer, now you mentioned waste, so I mentioned it. Coburg's waste goes up to Falpots, has been since 1986. Disposed there.
Low level waste.
Yes,
Not high level.
spent fuel at Coburg is currently, and everyone says we have this vast pile of glowing green stuff lying around somewhere. If you stack all Coburg spent fuel we've had to date for 32 years operation, we'd fit about 40% of one tennis court of fuel. The disposal process is we just got EIA approval on the interim store, an interim store at Coburg outside the reactor buildings, the reactor was done for. And we expect to move that by 2025 to Falpots, the interim store at Falpots. We'd expect then 20, 30 years in the future to start putting into deep disposal, which is being done as we speak in Finland. We've got the license for their disposal. It's being done. It's not a rocket science or good underground formation.
Thank you very much,
Yes.
Dave. Now, our next question.
Hi, my name is Roloff van der Merwe. My company is called Eco International. I'm without reservation in favor of sustainability. So I have just 5 short questions for you. You said that Treasury paying up
And I'll
front.
ask you to keep it to 3.
I will be very short. I'm not going to make a speech. Just commenting or asking your comment on the following. Treasury paying up front does not equal free electricity. If Treasury puts $1 million or $1 trillion or $1 trillion rand on the table, that doesn't mean free electricity. The taxpayers still have to come up with the money. Secondly, you said you compared a nuclear catastrophe with traffic accidents. You can't compare nuclear catastrophe with traffic accidents. I would like your comment on comparing it with solar. If there is an accident with solar energy, it would be sunburn at the most. If there was a wind turbine whose blade came off, it might hit one of the workers down, standing below the turbine, but it's not going to affect the whole environment and the whole country. Your comment on that, please. The following one is waste storage. We're talking about, what did you say, 30 years from now you're going to take it to Finland?
Not Finland, Falpots.
You're taking it to Falpots now, and then 30 years later you're going to take it to deep storage?
We'll dig a hole in the ground. We'll dig a kilometre. The reason you delay the digging is because of the heat load of the field. But if it decays away, which is more than the spent batteries do.
250,000
If it's
years?
not, if it's not nuclear, you don't have to, if it's nuclear waste, you've got to do something with it. And there could be an accident, it could leach into the ground. So, what is your comment on that? That if it's renewable energy, then it does not have to be, nothing has to be hidden away or put away. Right, my last one, I think. Why is Germany withdrawing from nuclear? They are some of the best engineers in the world, and talk as we like, we cannot take away from them that they have done some of the best engineering feats in the world. So why would they withdraw? And then my last one is, you said that nuclear heat that is generated from uranium through nuclear would afford us the opportunity for desalination. That's just the heat that is generated. And you yourself was very proud of your solar geyser on top of your roof. So heat can come from the sun, it can come from the wind, it does not have to come from uranium. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Let me quickly start with the last one. Designers of desalination plants require certain temperatures, operating temperatures, and so on and so forth. I'm not an expert in that field. Yes, perhaps you can achieve certain temperatures with concentrated solar panels, but I've not done the cost comparisons. The Arabs or the Middle East countries are using their oil to desalinate the water as a source of heat. If you have a design that is out of this world, that can beat in terms of performance, that can beat this other, the nuclear or the oil one, by all means. But such designs at the moment don't exist. But what exists, what has been put in place and has been used is nuclear desalination and oil. But you're welcome to design one.
How do you remove the uranium from the water?
German withdrawing from nuclear, the Germans can afford the luxury of a political pursuit in order to, they made a political decision. You're quite right in saying Germany has got a lot of good engineers. That decision was a political decision. And Germany's carbon footprint has gone up since that decision was taken. And Germany can afford the luxury of making such a mistake. I'll call it a mistake. Why? Because they are neighbors with France that can, at the phone call away, we want 600 megawatts. They are neighbors with the Scandinavian countries that have got huge hydro generation that they can simply say, please. So if we had the luxury of phoning Swaziland or Zimbabwe or Lesotho to say we are 600 megawatts short, by all means, maybe we could run our grid.
You're not answering the question, but that's fine.
The Germans,
70% renewable in Germany.
they're not 100% renewable anyway.
Well, their pensioners get paid for putting power
Can
into
you
the
answer the
grid.
rest of the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think, are you responding to?
Sorry, I was just commenting that the article yesterday points out that the current German wind and solar energy portion is 17.9% of their energy last year. And they're building coal stations to make up for the shut down nuclear stations.
Knox, continue.
Waste storage, you asked the question about waste storage. I thought it was addressed by Dave Nichols. Okay. Yes, you're quite right. You're quite right to say you cannot compare a nuclear accident with traffic. In fact, you can't compare anything, but sometimes you illustrate something. The point I was making, I was not saying the two are equivalent. I was saying we are quite comfortable, not comfortable, but we can live with the fact that 30,000 people die on the road every year. but there is no hullabaloo about that.
Oh, yes, there is.
Okay, but it's not the same hullabaloo as there's no anti car lobby in this country.
Oh, yes, there is.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so yeah, if the comparison you think it's unfair, yeah, it was made to illustrate a point. Treasury, you say treasury does not mean that it is free. The point I was making was that the same guarantees for renewables, the same guarantees for coal, the same guarantees for just about every major project. So why are we picking on nuclear? It's the same thing for all the
We have people dying on the mining waste areas from uranium and radium and radon gas.
May I now move on to another
Okay.
Clive? Sorry, Clive had a question.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clive Ferreira. I analyse on the numbers side, so I know a bit about the numbers of power station. And I must say I've got something in common with your background. I've advised on Wangi many years ago.
Okay, right.
So I know a little bit about power stations. I think your admission that you're not an economist, I think, is very important, because I think you haven't convinced me. We need more numbers to make decisions, especially on a day when our cost of borrowing is increased by, I think, 3 or 4%. So I think that is very important. So my question is, you need to share us, if you want to convince us that this is good and not just another scientific project like the Manhattan engineers. You remember, what you are busy doing is babies of the Manhattan project. And the reality is that's old technology. So my question is very clearly, show me one proper, unsubsidized nuclear plant or company in the world that people are investing money in. The investors are charging to without government guarantees and subsidies. And secondly, I'd like to know, give us, when nuclear plants are notorious for being over time, over budget, and probably not on cost, on tariff. So what tariff and when are you going to bring it in? Because we cannot commit a lot of money now for something which we don't know when the power is going to come on. And then finally, you talk about the corruption and the procurement, and those are good points. But the point is, you need to convince us. How you convince us that you will be running a project that will be procurement free and corruption free, like the renewable project, which is one of the big hallmarks of the renewable project.
What project was that?
Starting with your last one, I cannot promise you that. I am actually with you in terms of saying we want to make sure that there's no corruption. I said earlier on, if you organize a march against corruption, I'll join you. So you can't ask me that question to say, how are we going to solve the problem of corruption? It's a national issue that you and I and everybody else should address together. So I'm not here to say, I guarantee that nuclear procurement is going to be, the industry is not going to do the procurement. The government and ESCOM, whatever, are going to do. We are on the receiving end. We are ready to build the nuclear power plants. The procurement is in government. If Minister Matobo was here, perhaps you could ask him that question, or Mr. Zuma. But I'm with you in terms of we don't want any corruption. Dave, do you want to add something? Sorry.
I hate to answer your question for you, but I'll answer your question first of all. First of all, ESCOM will be contracting with the owner operator of nuclear plants, and we'll contract with an overseas state corporation. So the answer to the question is, one of the reasons we're not liked in the industry is because a nuclear deal is a deal between a state corporation like ESCOM, a state corporation in France, or China, or Russia, or Korea, and the contracting it and the financing is sorted out between the state banks, which means the middlemen don't get their cut. That's a comment. Secondly, in terms of the actual machines that have been on time and on budget, well, I'll give you one. First of all, Coburg. Coburg was ordered in 76 from the Vienna 82. It ran 18 months late because it was sabotaged. I think sabotage counts as a force majeure. It was on schedule before then. As we speak now, the Abu Dhabi job, 4 reactors is on schedule. The Belarus job is on schedule. The Pakistan job for Karachi 2 and 3 are on schedule, about 3 months ahead of schedule. There are certain projects running late, but of the about 60 reactors in the world. About 45 of them are being essentially on schedule. Nothing's perfect in life. There's a few famous ones that are horribly overscheduled, mainly for politics reasons. But essentially the answer is that if we go out to tender, we will go out to open tender. We will open those tenders and we will choose the vendor which is most competitive for the country. And we will have, like we did with the Nuclear One negotiations and like with Coburg 30 years ago, we will have penalty clauses being late. And one of the differences between Coburg, the nuclear build, and the build of Medupi Cassili is Medupi Cassili was Eskom buying a Meccano set. We bought an engine from him and a gearbox from him and a body from him and some extras from somebody else. And the interface problem was all Eskom's. And we haven't done a wonderful job there. I can spend a long time discussing what the problems were, and I can explain why it's a whole pile of history. The nuclear deal, and we've said this publicly and explicitly, and I've said it on many occasions, is going to be, we want to buy your standard machine with you constructing it locally, and you take the risks. And the penalty clause on the Nuclear One deal was about $1.5 million a day for being late. They had a date, they said they'll deliver on a certain date, and we said if you don't deliver that date, you'll pay $1.5 million a day thereafter, being late. That is a contract. That is the difference between buying it. Now the trouble with the renewables is simple. I'll be slightly devious and I'll be shocked today, but Eskom, on your behalf, is currently buying an amount of power which will end up being about $15 billion worth, 15 billion rands worth a year, at about twice the price of our current sale price, and about 6 times the price of our avoidable cost. And we are doing that as a principle to keep everybody else going happily. The renewables are great as long as you don't want sun power in the evening or when the wind's not blowing. I get a little bit of passion. If you get the Western Cape coming to me and saying they would like to have a carbon-free Cape Town, famous statement, Madam DeLille is saying she wants to buy renewables to make Cape Town's power supply carbon-free. She has a problem with that. It's been carbon-free since 1984, when Coburg started up. Because Cape Town's supplied by Coburg, and to my knowledge at my power station, we don't actually burn much coal. We burn diesel generators once a week to check they work.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Yes, my sympathies are due to Salon.
No, just outside.
Okay, no, because I also have myself, I confine myself to 3 questions on cost, safety, waste. Knox, I love Knox a lot. Why didn't you tell us that all around the world, wherever you go, renewables for grid energy is catastrophically expensive, with no exceptions. In Germany, it's been a disaster, except for the richer elites. Everywhere you go, England, the same thing. In South Australia, the same thing. The costs have gone up and up and up. The only beneficiaries are the richer elites. We speak about storage. We can get storage. Well, yes, there is one good renewable energy system in South Africa, solar CSP with storage. I think it's wonderful engineering, great engineers. What is the cost? For Boksburg, R2.80 a kilowatt hour. In other, the facts are there. The project manager told me this himself. The man in charge told me this. For the latest one, Mr. Zani, for peak Zani, if that's how I pronounce it, peak power R4.40. Redport is going to cost even more. The costs of renewables, the only people who benefit are the rich elites. On safety, I agree with the gentleman here. You shouldn't have spoken about road accidents. Just speak about accidents in energy. So the big 3 that you mentioned, which is TMI, nobody killed. Fukushima, nobody killed. Chernobyl, about 55. There's other things that the lady...
People are dying.
Please, I did not interrupt you one single time. I did not interrupt you once. Wind scale was to do with weapons and that, and a minor thing. For example, in the solar accident at the Lutz plant in Barstow in 1989, the solar CSD, it blew up. It blew up. Mass evacuations, cancer-forming gases into the air, people hospitalized, nothing in the newspapers.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm saying, why did you mention this? The last one on waste. Why didn't you mention the fact that the waste from renewables lasts forever until the end of time? Why didn't you say that the waste from solar plants, including cadmium, mercury, lead, and that, lasts forever, and that the renewable people haven't got the faintest clue how they're going to store or recycle this for the next 5,000 billion years?
The best way to answer that question, very simple. The reason why I didn't say that is I wanted you to say it.
Yeah, well, that's mine.
And may I just have, Knox, are you happy to?
No, fine, I'm fine, I'm fine.
You've got water there?
Okay.
I think you might have to.
Jane, thank you. Hugh Lane is my name. I'm just an ordinary.
Sorry, can you speak to
Sorry.
Go to the front.
Sorry, just Pebble
Yes,
Bed.
because there should just be one conversation going on in the room. Thank you.
Pebble Bed, it's been raised a couple of times, and it hasn't really been addressed here tonight. Like it disappeared from the sea, I think we as South Africans spent a lot of money investigating the viability of Pebble Bed. For those of you who don't know about it, and I'm no expert, you had the opportunity to have small little nuclear generators generating at different positions around the country. So safety would have been reduced, or put it this way, the risk of danger, if I may, would have been reduced. Distribution costs would have been reduced, and somehow that has just disappeared. And I'd really like somebody here to explain what's happened to that. Anthony, I also like No. I'd like your suggestion about scaling this thing up gradually. I think we as South Africans have a huge fear that there's a massive deal done. And I rather like your approach that it's done incrementally. Now, if we had Pebble Bed, that would lend itself perfectly to an incremental development.
I think
of
that's
this.
just
And then
the
one
concept. It
last
can be done incrementally.
Okay, then one last question. You spoke about the risks on the Russians. I've read your judgment, the Earthlife judgment, the Western Cape Pine book. And what came through from that is the court seemed to have cited the various agreements in place. The Russian one seemed, according to the court, to be far more developed. In other words, it was almost there as a deal, if I dare use that word. And one of the scary things there was an indemnity by the South African government that if anything went wrong, we would pick up the tab. I'd like you to address that.
Yes,
Can I answer those questions? Because they all end at me.
Do you want to come up here?
I'll come to the front. Yes, I apologise. I'm going to do it in front.
Are you happy to
No,
share?
sure, no, sure.
Just be so
Okay, let's start at the beginning. I'll start with the simple one, the indemnity one. I give a simple answer is that the nuclear industry has, since its beginning, functioned on the basis of what's called strict liability. And that means that if you have a nuclear license to operate a nuclear facility, and anything happens at that facility which has radiation damage to you, you can sue for damages to the operator of that facility. You can sue nobody else. If when you fly to Cape Town, the plane crashes, your wife can sue the aircraft manufacturer, the engine manufacturer, the service company, the pilot's wife, the air traffic controller, anyone else to sue to find who's guilty. In the nuclear industry, if you have an accident, or even a release of any kind, you are liable, end. And nobody who supplies you is liable to be sued. So if Kubrick has an accident, Eskom is liable. All you've got to prove is that the radiation came from Kubrick and it hurt you. That's all. And the reason that and I'll be honest, yes, you're right, the Russian deal, the Russian MOU seemed to me to be the beginning of a deal. It wasn't a deal because it had no money in it, so it was the beginning of a negotiation of some kind, I guess. I wasn't involved in that discussion, I can't guess that, but that's the logic. It was the beginning, which the Russians normally do, by the way. They normally start off with a very high-level MOU discussion and works down. The reason that is in there is there is one country in the world that has put a law in place which says if you are a supplier to a nuclear facility and the facility has a problem, you can be sued. And that quite simply is the scariest thing to any company known to man. And the country is India, and the Russians are in the middle of doing a contract in India. So my guess is they put it in there because they didn't want us to do the same thing from the Indians have done. And the Indians have given them a waiver because it doesn't work. Okay, that's the answer they go. It's standard world practice. It was a very standard statement. It was odd to put it in the MOU, but it was a standard nuclear indemnity issue. In terms of PPMR, I spent today in Potchefstroom University working on the restart of PPMR, and to be honest, you put in the press of it. PPMR stopped in 2000, essentially Eskom lost interest in PPMR in many ways. Probably in about 2003, I know very well, I was running the project at the time, primarily because the national policy was Eskom was not going to build any more plant. The free market will build all future power stations and remove the need for Eskom to be involved in anything. Which unfortunately was great, except no one did. because the only thing you had was Dirk Cooney running around saying, will you please pay me the cost of my production plus a good profits, irrespective of the market price. And at that point, that's not free market, that's a subsidy scheme, a bit like renewables are. And the answer to the question is that ESCOM therefore withdrew. So ESCOM has literally about 18 months ago said, let's look at it again. So what ESCOM's doing now is we started, we looked at it, we've done some conceptual, it's still very much paper studies, still very much a part of university professors. But the aim is to see if we can restart it, and the present indications look that it's a, I can spend the rest of the night till 3 in the morning discussing what we do, but no, it is a restart process. The one difference wasn't mentioned is that the PMR starts out with a fundamentally different principle to a current light water plant. On a Kubo type plant or any kind of reactor, you say, we have the potential for an accident, but we'll make it so unlikely by all these systems we add that it's essentially impossible. What the PMR did was said, we will take the fundamental physics and said the physics doesn't allow us to have an accident. So we have no safe systems on a high temperature reactor, you just have a systems line so it can't fail.
Right, the
Madam.
history is 8 billion rand.
Never mind, it
was
is.
spent on
I want to invite Jeffrey, whom I didn't introduce.
How much you spend every year on renewables?
You have some words, some comments on what you've heard? Rob is an economist working in the energy sector.
Okay, for my sins, my name's Rob Jeffrey, and I work in the energy sector and have done for many years. A couple of points I want to make. Knox made a very important point right at the beginning, and that was how we're going to power the economy going forward. Let's forget about all the fancy stuff. And unfortunately, it's a very emotional subject, and that's I've gathered from this evening. I mean, it's quite ridiculous how emotional people get. But anyway, the point about it is that by the year 2030, 16 million new people will be looking for jobs. We have created since 2008 to 2013 500,000 jobs, 700,000 jobs. Our growth rate is 0.7%. Let me tell you, if you need to fill, let's say 12 million, because a few old buggers here like me and so on will die out, we will actually still need 12 million jobs. Well, we need growth rates of 5%. We need energy growth of something like 3 or 4%. That's what the Asian countries are doing, 3, 4, or even 5%. The Asian countries have growth rates of 6%. I could tell you what they're using to power their systems. Now the point is that I'm going to ask a question, and some of the more technical guys here are not allowed to answer. But what is the oldest solar storage system the world knows?
The sun.
Yeah, no, forget that. Storage, known to man and useful to the man. What is the oldest one? No, it's solar. It's actually nuclear power, which, I'm sorry, it was caused when suns combined and they formed a lot of heavy elements and caused nuclear power to be formed, and you get it transferred. Okay, let's not go further on it. You and I could debate it sometime. But the point is, the next oldest one is fossil fuels. Without a doubt, solar, at least nuclear, is something like 40 times more efficient, 30 times more efficient than wind and solar. Coal is about 15 to 20 times more efficient. Solar, and it's been proved, there's studies overseas that prove that solar and wind are so inefficient that if you try to run a country on it, you will actually go into mortal decline for the economy. And with respect to the man at the back who suggested that Germany was going ahead with all its anti-nuclear, yes, they made a mistake. You've got to realize that Mrs. Merkel started climate change discussions going, and they have stopped building new renewables now. They have actually stopped subsidizing them. And what one's got to recognize that actually renewables are highly, highly inefficient. They might be useful for running a home, and you might be able to store it at great cost, let me say. And you need a lot of capital to do that. I'm not sure it exists in Soweto and so on. Energy poverty is rising in every country where there is, where they run via renewables. And that's Germany, the UK, California, South Australia was mentioned. Everyone, energy poverty is rising. So we need to look very closely at nuclear and the last point I want, and coal. And by the way, the last point I want to make is wind is possibly the most environmentally damaging actually power system the world has ever invented. Not only is it inefficient, it kills birds at a prodigious rate.
It's changed.
It's not changed with respect. And I'm sorry, we could have a debate about that, but I'm not going to. But those are the facts, and go and have a look at Valpro. They are complaining about the wind farms in the Eastern Cape. I've said enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now this gentleman has something to add. Please say who you are.
Hi, my name is Tabi, and I'm from Accenture. So I'm neither an economist nor an engineer. But basically, I think my question is centered around nuclear fusion. I mean, one of the things I understand is that France is actually, they are building the biggest, possibly, nuclear fusion reactor. And you know, one of the reasons why France was selected as a candidate was because they're very comfortable with nuclear and they've actually doubled down on it, so they have lots of skills in the nuclear space. So just to get to it, and the possibilities with nuclear fusion is that we can actually then create an energy source like the sun, and we'd never have to use anything else. If we could make it viable, we'd never have to use anything else to get energy. So now my question is, you know, number one, you know, what are the possibilities in terms of increasing our nuclear research capacity if we take on the nuclear project? I mean, is there a possibility that we can increase our skills in that area? And what are some of the other auxiliary, you know, industries that can actually spring up as a result of maybe taking on, you know, nuclear projects? So I know in the medical field and whatnot there's use of that, but yeah, just the subsidiary downstream.
That's a highly technical question. I think the nuclear engineers and scientists like Dave Nichols could drive. But we more pedestrian in our approach to things. That's why I was just talking about the public's perceptions of nuclear. That's a very deep.
Just very quickly answer the fusion one. With the wine in my hand.
I think you need it.
No, my comment is simple. Is fusion is one of those things you've been waiting for to make it work. We follow interest. It's very expensive to research. The day that fusion becomes viable, it will change the world in a decade. And I put a context to that which says natural gas, which we all now see as being standard, combined cycle gas turbines, the way we've done it. If you were standing in this room in 1979 and you mentioned combined cycle gas turbines, you'd be looked at with a rather weird face, which says they're not very reliable, are they? And nobody uses them. And 10 years later, and I can explain why it changed, but 10 years later, they were the dominant form of new build. 80% of all new plant was combined cycle gas turbines. So my view is, if fusion, I think it has enormous potential. It could work. If it works, we can make it work. At the moment, no one's cracked the question. Fusion sits in the same bucket that we've got as shale gas. In other words, if you can make it work, it changes the rules of the game. But it ain't working yet, and you can't plan on things you hope will work in 5 years' time.
So I'm saying, but do we start at fission? Is there a chance that if we build up our capacities?
Well, fission and fusion are not the same thing. I'll just give you one last question.
Yes.
I once employed somebody who was a PhD, an ex-South African who was a PhD in the States on plasma physics. And I thought, this man must know about fusion. He worked for me, he's now at Kuwait. And I said, is fusion going to work? And he was a young guy. He was about 30. This was a few years ago. And he said, my grandchildren won't see it work. So that was my I may be wrong, but I'm just saying is I wouldn't put the country's future on fusion
Thank you. This gentleman, would you like to give your name, please? Can you stand up?
My name is Lawrence Makeke, Australia Energy Systems. Mine is more directed at the growth potential of the country, especially if we are going to consider nuclear as an option. I mean, in terms of the skill set or the development towards acquiring the skill set, what is South Africa's position at the moment as we speak? And the second question is more towards Dave around the issues of governance around his organization, ESCOM. How is it then become comfortable for the consumer to have confidence in an ESCOM process or ESCOM-driven process, given the type of maladies that we've actually witnessed in the previous few years? And I think it becomes difficult for anybody to confidently sit here and say we're going to task ESCOM to actually undertake such a massive capital expenditure project, while we know exactly what the actual results are. Middle is there to attest to some of the problems. And how is then nuclear going to be more efficient if we are still struggling with the simple delivery like
Answer about ESCOM, but I think your first question about the situation of the country in terms of embarking on this and the development. Again, my disclaimer that I'm not an economist, but what comes first? Electricity supply stimulating economic growth, or economic growth justifying electricity? I don't have a clear answer. My perception, my understanding is if you supply sufficient, affordable power and grow the consumers and grow opportunities where electricity can be used and is accessible cheaply, you are more than likely to influence economic growth instead of actually waiting for economic growth. Oh yeah, now economic growth is 5%, therefore let us build nuclear power plants. It's what comes first, chicken or the egg? That was the third.
We have a situation where we are net exporters of electricity to neighboring countries. And what we're saying is that we're growing at a very slow pace. What is there that then gives us the latitude to go and make a decision to go invest in nuclear to start with? We have a very retarded growth to start with. And therefore, what is there that suggests that we're going to grow enough to warrant the investment in
We are probably at a situation where we're exporting energy to our neighboring countries because our supplier of electricity was telling us every night, switch off your pumps, do this, and it worked. It psychologically worked, and people closed down factories and so on. So we've got access not because we increased our capacity of generation, but because we reduced our consumption. So that's to me that's just it's a temporary thing. Plus, when you're planning for power generation, particularly nuclear, you're not planning for the current situation. When we were having load shedding, I would hear people saying, but this nuclear is not going to help us. It was not meant for that kind of application. It's a long-term planning. There are countries that plan 30 years ahead, 50 years ahead. We can't be knee-jerk reaction in terms of saying, now we've got shortage of electricity, let's go look around for somebody who can give us a nuclear power plant. Because it will take time to develop and to that. So long-term planning, short-term planning, those are part of the planning of a country. We are as ready as we can be if we make a decision to go forward. We will never get to a point where we've got enough operators, enough nuclear engineers for this project, just waiting for the project to happen. It doesn't happen that way. You decide to go on a project, and the phases of the project includes the development of the skills, the development of all sorts of things. Everything is planned to come together in time. It does not happen that you train everybody that you would want to train, so they're sitting basically waiting for the project to happen. That's not how it is done. You announce that this is what we're going to do. We're going to go on an RFI, after that RFP, and when decisions are made, it will take time for you to pour the first concrete. And in that time, you better be training your operators. And part of the agreement, may I add, with the vendor, for that vendor to train our local people to operate and to whatever in terms of that technology. So don't worry about that aspect of things. We will never get to a point where we've got a room full of people that are just waiting for the project. That's not how it works.
Thank you, Knox. Are you willing to take one more question? One more. Well, Charles, at the end, you had your hand up first. And then, can you take two?
Yeah, sure.
And
So it seems like you were a bit in a quandary deciding whether it was the chicken or the egg. Let me give you the answer. Economic growth before you take 9 billion or whatever out of taxpayers' pockets for your project. I'll make a deal with you. You change the regulations and the things that are keeping South Africa poor. Once we hit 3% economic growth, we might be able to afford your fanciful scheme. So let that be the deal to government. Now, get economic growth going, and then we might be able to afford your scheme.
So very important comment. South Africa had, we know, because we had 3.4% year-on-year demand growth rate from 1982 to 2007. And we said that in 2007 the lights would stop going on because we haven't got any more power stations. From 2007 onwards, we initiated the most severe economic policy to drive companies out of the country. We paid people to go away. We paid smelters to close down. The fall in demand over the last 10 years has been a function of the fact that we've not been able to provide power to anybody. And the fact that anyone looking at building a new power-consuming company or sinking a new shaft didn't get beyond the discussion at the coffee bar before somebody said, I'm not going to invest, there's no power. Cost is a secondary issue. No. It will take us 5 years to get back into growth. Yeah. But the answer was the decision of the 1990s that the free market would build the utility infrastructure at their cost caused the collapse post-2007. Our current economic mess, although I'm not going to support any government particularly, is not a function. It's predominantly because you as an investor would not invest in South Africa because there's no power. You cannot build
as
your
ESCOM don't want to break up. You don't want to do what other countries do in order to make it happen.
The lowest cost countries in Europe have not got broken up utilities. The US did deregulation in the 1980s. They got to what about 2/3 of the US states deregulated by 2000. They stopped deregulation and half the states are now re-regulated. So the answer to the question is deregulation has not worked anywhere in the world in power systems. It made money for people. This Australian grid is very profitable, but the price of power in Australia has doubled.
That's okay. Just wanted to make one point. Electricity is the necessary but not a sufficient condition for economic growth.
Okay,
It's as
thank
simple
you.
as that.
Now this gentleman, and then Des, and then...
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Gilmore. I'm an investment analyst. Knox, the question I put to you is, isn't the harsh reality we just can't afford it, not now and not in any foreseeable time frame? As I drove here, the Minister of Finance said our growth rate this year is going to be 0.6%, and if we're very lucky over the next few years, I mean the next 5 years, we might get into the dizzy heights of 1 and 1.5%. If we're talking of the order of 1.2 trillion rands, that is an order of magnitude bigger than Medupi and Kasili put together. It is something we can't even begin to imagine. It's just so big. The only way we could pay for this, in my humble opinion, would be in a power purchase agreement with the Russians or whoever. We'd effectively become electricity slaves, and we wouldn't really be able to afford it because you couldn't afford to buy the hardware that they'd put down, and the tariffs that they'd put in place would be so onerous that we'd be paying for the next, I don't know, 50 or 100 years. But I put it to you.
This 9 point whatever figure, 1 trillion whatever, that's for the total program over a period of 20 to 30 years. That's what you are talking about. That's what we cannot afford. Even given the condition that we will build at a pace we can afford. In other words, I've seen a document from the Department of Energy, to add to what Dave was saying, which was saying we will build the first 2 units and we will review the way forward. So you are saying that even approaching it like that, we're still saying that we cannot afford. Because the alternative as Dave was telling us, is to put a whole lot of renewables and a whole lot of storage. Is the costing been done? And ask the question, can we afford that? Let us be consistent. If we are asking questions about affordability, let us not only ask that in relation to one technology. Let us ask the same questions for any technology. So at the end of the day, what do we do as a nation? But that's actually beyond me. But
surely the optimal mix would be nuclear, 1 and 2. Gas, we have this paranoid idea about gas. I mean, you can get as much gas as you want from all over the world. I mean, we might not have too much here. You can get it from Mozambique, Tanzania, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of it around about here. Gas, you can do wind, solar, whatever. Getting a mix gives you diversification and thus reduces your risk on any one particular type of technology, surely.
That's our theme.
Which is what you were saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
what I'm saying is, if you go for the full 8, you know.
No, but the full 8, they've explained that you agree that if we're going to come back to you, we have fixed the price so that they don't jump on you because you want a fleet. Now we've got you. You've built the first 2 using our technology. We can ask any price from you now. That's what Dave was explaining. That commitment for the 8 or whatever is not to say we will build them. We will build them if we want to, but should we come back and ask for 2 more? We've agreed on a price up front. That's what he was saying.
But can't you go to other suppliers? You don't have to be locked into one supplier.
The problem with that approach is the problem with that approach is we want a fleet approach. We want a fleet approach so that we can build an industry. So that when you put up a factory to manufacture pumps to supply that industry, you cannot set up a factory to supply for 2 reactors. And after that, it's a completely different technology. So the fleet approach is meant to rejuvenate the industry. So we need that approach.
My name is Des Miller. I class myself as an energy specialist across all energy disciplines. So I can actually have a field day in a conversation like this today. I love them all, they're all great. And one needs to have a discussion around sustainable energy. How do you actually achieve that? And that's the subject we'll talk about later on. So I'm not going to actually have a technical dissertation on energy. What I'm actually going to do is have a bit of a philosophical approach to this. And there was a lovely statement a while ago in saying, to stop all wars on Earth, and to have total peace on Earth and unification on Earth, we need a common enemy. Yeah, something like an alien invasion will kind of stop all wars. Just kind of do something hypothetical. And it kind of makes me reflect back to the 60s and 70s when the world was in a little bit of trouble and we had this Cold War going on. And JFK made the alarming decision to start a space race. And he says, we're going to put a man on the moon. At the time, people were trying to circumnavigate the Earth. Like, let's start a space race, we're going to put a man on the moon. And what it did is it took the world away from this interiorization of looking at each other and having issues with each other, and put our attention outwards. Okay. And it may have saved the Cold War from actually happening, is the space race. Look at our own country, 2010, World Cup football. How unified was this country? We had something to aspire to, something to achieve, something that we wanted to do. And it actually, for the time that the build up to the program, the building of the stadiums, although they were 6 months, a year late on procuring those stadiums. We were 6 months to a year early on completing that. Brazil couldn't even do it. That's what South Africa can do. And that's where, if you put the attention of the industry from the interior, looking at each other, to something exterior, and something to aspire towards and work towards, that is what you need to do with this country. And the only thing I can think of right now that would actually put South Africa's attention on growth, prosperity for all, and economy is a nuclear build program. It is not a $1 trillion rand spend. It's probably a 600 and 650 billion rand spend. I'd love to get paid 1.2 trillion rand to build 9.6 gigawatts of energy, but sorry, not in my lifetime. We need to look at the program itself. We need to look at getting the attention of this country away from, look at where we are. I mean, gee, we're complaining about so many things. We've just got everybody under the microscope because we've got nothing to look forward to and no future to create. And this is the future for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Final question is for the gentleman at the back.
Sorry.
Do you really believe that the nuclear program will actually get built in South Africa? Civil society will not stand for a nuclear build program in South Africa. We know the SFC ruling. We know that we don't need it. We can't afford it. And it's open to corruption. So we can have this debate about the technical aspects and about carbon and all of that. But civil society is standing up against this program for those 3 reasons. We will not build nuclear in South Africa. Do you think, Knox, and I had this conversation with you before, do you think we will actually get this program off the ground? I personally don't think so.
I personally think so, and I hope so, and I hope so. Because if we do not, my heart bleeds. If we do not, you had was it Dave who was to give us statistics about 34 gigawatts that we need to replace. Unless we come to terms, and I know Rob has spoken quite a bit about the case for coal. Unless we come to terms with the fact that we're not going to the COP21 commitment or whatever, we say, okay, we've got lots of coal, we'll continue to build new coal power plants. How else are we going to meet the demands of our electricity in this country? Forget about the politicians. They'll come and go. And if you don't believe we are going to have a nuclear power plant because you don't like Zuma or whatever, it's not going to last forever.
Make a point from the economic point of view. If we do not raise our economic growth rate and we increase our power, which involves, you know, I'm in favor of nuclear power, I'm in favor of coal-fired power, I'm in favor of solar, and I'm in favor of a bit of gas, but we haven't got any. But if we don't get our growth rate up, we will have a Venezuelan decline here, and that is what we're facing. So we'd better get that growth rate up. I won't live to see it, but fortunately, but my children will. And it will be a major catastrophe unless we start getting more jobs done.
Are you willing to take one more? Yes, I mean, the gentleman's been on his feet for nearly a
No, it's fine.
That's all right,
I used to be a lecturer.
It's all right.
He's fabulous. He's doing great.
May I get you any more water or anything?
No, I've got water here. I'm fine.
Get him a whiskey.
Would you say who you are, please?
My name is Bob Posma. I'm a regular visitor to South Africa. One thing that I think somebody should look at, I looked at the average electricity prices around the world. And I think it's very instructive to look at the price of electricity in France, which is about 70% nuclear, compared with Germany, and compare it with Denmark, which is almost all wind energy. And look it up yourself, and this is what consumers pay for electricity, and it's basically France has got the lowest cost of electricity in Europe. Denmark's got the highest cost of electricity. And that is reality. And that's what South Africa faces if we don't have nuclear power in this country.
answer. I have a rather cheeky question. It seems to me that ESCOM is determining the nuclear program. Why does NIASA exist, if I may ask?
NIASA is the industry association. It's an industry association.
They want to sell us things.
ESCOM belongs to NIASA.
ESCOM is a member, is a key member of NIASA. So is NEXA, so is Rosatom, so is Marion Roberts, so is Group 5 until recently. So it's a number of organizations. Anybody that has got that's the nature of an industrial association. Anybody who wants to, it's a voluntary association. I should have had a slide at least introducing what NIASA is about, but I went straight to the topic at hand. Yeah, we're not a procurement or anything. We're just a collection of people that are in the industry with common interests, hopefully to have a voice in government, and hopefully to be the recipient of certain concerns that the government might have with the industry, that sort of thing.
And it's an independent.
It's independent of any
Government and independent
of vendors.
NNR and NEXA belong to it, so it's not independent.
No, NNR does not belong to it. NEXA is an industry. It belongs to it. NNR is a regulator. It cannot belong to the industry.
Well,
Same as
I
the wind
will
energy
take you on
association.
NEXA.
Any final? Okay, very last.
Okay, sure.
Yes?
Just a very short question. Anyone can answer. Does anyone know whether Elon Musk is going to be a big game changer? Is the storage going to change so radically that this will put the industry on its head, and where we will have a sort of mountain of batteries sitting in the middle of the Karoo supplying this? Is anyone got a good answer?
I've got a perfect answer. Get my answer.
Yes, no.
Yes, you
Well,
know.
you know the answer. I'll give an answer. Do you drive a motor car?
Yes.
Okay, fine. The simple question to all of you, do you accept that motor car companies are the highest tech, cost competitive companies going? Yes? Yes, absolutely. Okay, what technology is the car battery in your car battery? No. It's lead acid. When was lead acid invented?
I have no clue. You must ask me all these questions.
1859.
Good stuff.
So the answer, the lowest cost, highest tech battery we can use today for base storage of energy was invented in 1859 and has not had a technical improvement in terms of capacity per kilowatt since about 1900.
Okay.
And actually the best storage system is actually pump storage, which is which was about 1920s technology. And of interest, no one's ever built no utility's ever built a utility scale lead acid battery to store energy. These guys are trying to get down to the level of being a lead acid battery. They're still not there. So these guys are trying to get down to the level of lead acid, which by the way is nowhere near the cost competitive of the pump storage scheme. And just of interest in the IRP 2016 version for draft, there are no pump storage schemes because they're too expensive.
I just want to comment.
The world may change next year, but it's not changing now.
I just want to kind of talk about this issue about storage.
Coal.
Sorry, do you have a speaker here?
I really want to talk about this issue about storage and the use of storage to make renewable energy baseload, where you can actually have renewable energy running or serving the interest. Of course, it can be done. But if you look at the efficiency of storage systems and batteries, the lead acid batteries you're talking about, Dave, is around about the 50%, 40% efficiency. The more advanced stuff from Tesla, I had a chat to the fellow from Tesla, they're talking about some of the 80% efficiencies over there. Which means that you put a certain amount of energy in and you get a bit less out. Okay. Now, if you want to have, say, for example, base load out of a solar power station. Solar power station will have 20% to 25% capacity factor, which means it only produces its nameplate capacity for 25% of its time during the year. Which means I have to now capture 75% energy if I want to produce 100% baseload power out of that solar power station. Which means I'm going to have to build another 3 more exactly the same size solar power stations to feed the batteries when the sun is shining, and you then have some difference. But then I've got an efficiency issue. So I'm going to have to build another little power station to cover that efficiency issue of the batteries itself. Never mind the cost of the battery and all the nasty elements that go into the batteries. Those things don't last forever. They do recycle, they have a certain life cycle time, and there's some very nasty elements in those batteries to reprocess and stuff. And I'm sure technology will advance to a point where it will actually deal with those issues as well. But it is a cost issue. It is going to be a massive power station to do what a very small little power station like coal and nuclear can do as a matter of fact. Thank you.
No, I actually have a question. I've spent the whole night really listening very hard, and I can hear that there's some people in the audience that are very passionate in favor of nuclear, and I'm struggling to get to the bottom of the nucleus, excuse the pun or pun intended, of what it is that makes them so passionate about it. What is it? Why do they want it so badly?
Is it cost? Is it cost?
Kenny's not going to get any of that cost, so let him answer.
Quickly, because there are other people who could also answer. I'm sure Knox would like to answer because he's very passionate about it.
Can I answer exactly?
Andrew is answering.
Sorry, you shout too loudly, so sorry if you don't hear me. I need to get overexcited. I'm saying exactly, I'm an environmentalist. I'm a vegetarian. I care about nature. I care about the planet. So what I want to do is to take the gifts of nature and use them in the best way we possibly can, to work in harmony with nature. And by far the best way for power, bulk power, is nuclear power. The nature of God, if you believe that, I'm an atheist, I have to admit, has provided us with this wonderful, concentrated power source that can provide us with enormous amounts of power, sustainably, cleanly, safely, for the life of the planet. I want to work with nature. What it seems to me, the renewable people, with their gigantic machines, highly centralized, gigantic, they want to conquer nature and dominate nature. These massive wind turbines. I don't want that. I want to quite like Kubrick, a quiet, modest thing, blending in with nature. That's what I want.
Thank you, Andrew. Knox, would you like to answer that?
Perhaps one of the ways of looking at it is to say, if nature saw it fit to provide us energy through a nuclear process, why do we question? Why do we think there is something evil about nuclear? If the sun's source of energy is a nuclear process, ultimately, if in fact fossil fuel, the solar PVs are getting energy from a nuclear reactor.
Which is the sun.
Yes. So what is so sinister about nuclear? Why? In fact, we should be asking the question, why are you so passionate against nuclear? Because nuclear is actually natural.
Okay. This lady, no, just a quick comment, please.
Very quick comment, absolutely. When I see the children in State Park and Etwatwa who have been affected by uranium mining dust, I have to ask you all, is this what you want to happen to your children?
Thank you very much, Judith. Well, that has been an amazing session. It's been one of our longest, actually. And I think it's, thank you very much, Knox, for that and for giving us this information and creating the discussion we've had tonight. And as you said, it's about passion and it's about energy. And people think they have very extreme views about nuclear. And I think from what we've had tonight, it demonstrates that there's a lot of voices there that need to be heard. We need debate and dialogue about the nuclear program. And I'm going to, would you be interested in having a panel debate where we can have this lady and Rob? A divergence of views. And we can have it, which is, we need a large room, I think. and then we can really thrash out some of the details and some more of the myths of nuclear. And we'll hear from the renewable side as well. And then usually when I come into this room, I feel like I'm with many strangers, but now, since we've all participated and had a lively debate, I feel like I'm amongst friends. So thank you.